Good afternoon, Kristina. Thank you for your time today. Before we talk about Sebi's book, Sebi Teaches LCH a Lesson, just want to ask a few questions about being a parent in such a difficult time. So how long was it before Sebi got diagnosed with LCH?
Yeah, it was quite a long time, actually. I'm guessing other parents can probably identify with this. So I think I started taking him to the doctors when he was about 9 months old, and he had and he was then finally diagnosed with LCH when he was 2.5. But in that time period, before that happened, we were just constantly at the GPs and then at hospitals for various appointments, but we were seeing individual specialists. So he had what I just thought was cradle cap, because it's quite common when they're little, because at 9 months, obviously, he was very little. But it was really bad, like really bad. And it got worse as the years went on. So to the point that when he was finally diagnosed, it was like a red mass. You could hardly see his hair just from where he'd been scratching it so much, and it was bleeding. And we'd been going to dermatology at the hospital for that for a long time, but nobody, they just kept putting loads and loads more steroid creams our way, and nothing worked, and they could never work out why. And then he also had ear problems, so a lot of ear issues, lots of ear infections, smelly discharges and stuff. So again, we were going to ENT for that. So yeah, and it wasn't until he lost a lot of weight. I saw a photo of him at Christmas, just before he was diagnosed. And then in May, and I went to the GP. In fact, I spoke to a friend of mine that was a GP, and I said, this isn't right. And she said, you just got to go to the GP and really lay it on thick, because he'd lost loads of weight. His eye was starting to close, which we later found out was a skull lesion. His head was a mess. He also had LCH on his skin around his groin, which again, it was just nappy rash that nobody, and then that's when it was diagnosed finally. But yeah, it was pretty traumatic, but you never think it's going to be something like that. It's just, no. It was odd. It was just generally unwell.
Oh, so what was your first reactions of hearing the LCH diagnosis?
Well, it was odd, because we fought a little bit with the GP to with the underweight thing. And I remember the GP saying to me, all lads stretch out. And I said, yeah, but he's got taller, but he's lost weight as well. So,
yeah.
So we got a referral this time to a paediatrician, was the sort of answer to it all, if you like, that when we went to see the general paediatrician, she was finally able to put the dots together. And I went on my own with Sebi. My husband was at work. Someone else was looking after my little tiny baby, who's only a couple of months old. And the paediatrician kept on going on the phone and saying, would you mind just stepping outside? And I thought it was a bit rude, but anyway, unbeknown to me, she was ringing the dermatologist who he'd been seeing, and they were having a discussion saying, I think this is LCH. So anyway, we were brought back into the room. Again, I just thought it was a routine appointment. And she said, right, you need to get your husband in quick. I said, oh, he's at work. She said, no, you need to get him in quick. And then he came in from work. We went back in to see her, and she sat us down. And first of all, she actually told us it was a brain tumour. She got it wrong, but she said, you need to get to Southampton General as quick as you can. You need to go to the oncology unit. And she said, any red lights, you just drive through them. You need to get there as soon as you can. And all this time, because Sebi's only little, we're smiling, being happy parents, but inside we're absolutely absolutely crushed. It was so hard. That journey took so long. It was horrible. I can remember it now. And then after all this rush, we got to the oncology unit, PB ward in Southampton, and they were really chilled. They're like, yeah, take a seat. Yeah, no worries. And we're going, well, we've been rushed. It's fine. But it's their bread and butter. They do it every day, I guess. But yeah, within a day he was on chemo. So we never, ever, on that appointment when I went to see the paediatrician, I never thought it was going to be an oncology, or LCH. I don't know what I thought it was, really. Just, somebody's not got the cradle cap and the everything all worked out. Maybe it's some weird allergy thing or asthma, eczema or something. But yeah.
Had you heard of LCH before? Or is it just something brand new to you?
And they, when they diagnosed it, they didn't talk about LCH. They kept saying Langerhans cell histiocytosis. But when someone says that to you, within 2 seconds, you've forgotten it again because it's so complicated. And I kept saying to the nurse that was there, so I said, "What has he got? What did you say? What?" I just couldn't remember it. And then there's no leaflets around, so all the leaflets were around leukemia, all the awful childhood cancers, brilliant leaflets, loads of leaflets by Click Sargent, everything, but not one on LCH. There was nothing that I could just look at and say, oh, that's what it is. So I think from memory, the oncologist who we actually saw and we're still with now, she actually printed us something out and gave us a printout. But it was really weird because even on that, it was saying it wasn't a cancer, and then something else was saying it was a cancer, but they were saying we needed to go on chemo, and yeah, it felt a little bit like we didn't fit in the oncology ward, because I sound stupid, but because we didn't have a leaflet. I know it's sort of because you have all these stacks of leaflets and information in front of you. But, and I said, is there anybody else with LCH? They said, oh, we've got a couple more, but they're not in at the moment. It was all very rare, and yeah.
So do you think it's easier now to find the information about LCH?
I honestly don't know, because once you have a child with LCH, you become a bit of an expert in it. So you do a lot of the research at the beginning. You find out, or I did, I crammed, I went to the library, ordered loads of papers on it, medical papers, I read all about it. But then you kind of just, it, you understand it, you see your oncologist now it's every 6 months, but, quite frequently at the beginning. So honestly, I couldn't really answer that. I hope so. I hope it's better than it was. I think for me, the information need is right at the beginning. It's right at that, particularly with a young child, because you're generally exhausted with a young child anyway. You've got the stress, the emotional stress. You've probably got other children that you're looking after. You're in an oncology ward with lots of other children, lots of other illnesses, and you just want to feel like somebody's got your back.
So what changes would you want to see, if any?
I think the main one, it is a bit old-fashioned, but I think it is actually just a really simple leaflet. One of the reasons I did the book is also when we first went in, Sebi was an inpatient for a couple of weeks, and there was nothing to help explain what all these white coats were in talking about, and he was very little. So I'm lucky that I'm in PR, so I sort of I translate difficult concepts into sort of plain English. So I basically sort of sucked up everything they were saying, and I guess naturally as a parent I just started talking in his terms, like age appropriately. But I'm very aware that I'm sure there are a lot of people that don't have that ability, and so I think simple leaflet and probably the Super Sebi book, if when kids are diagnosed, they could just give you those two things and say, you're not alone, there's a website, there's everything else, but here's the first step, have a look at this, and then we can go from there. I think that would have helped me a bit. And it's not to put down the oncology staff at PB ward were amazing, absolutely amazing, but you just get that sense the whole way through. It's very rare. There isn't really any literature on it. Yeah, it's tricky.
So how did you manage to convey all the information to Sebi, obviously him being so young? How did you explain it to Sebi about his illness?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might just be naturally my personality. So when we were in the oncology ward, I noticed a lot of parents, and there's no right or wrong with this, but I noticed when we're in the playroom, a lot of parents were sort of labouring how ill their child was, and how are you feeling today? You feeling poorly today? You achy today? So really reinforcing like the negative side of it. And I thought, actually, and I've been through my own health issues, I understood the importance of positivity. So we've never talked. I don't think I've ever used the word illness or ill around Sebi, ever. And it's just the way we are. So I've always talked about how we go to hospital to keep you healthy, to keep you well, not to make you healthy, but to keep you healthy, to keep you well. Doctors and nurses will help you. And then things like the LCH, rather than labelling it, because I was very aware he was a very happy little chap. He didn't have any baggage. He didn't know what cancer was. A lot of adults, we obviously have this baggage and this fear around it. I've never known anybody close that's had cancer, so I had no experience. So maybe my naivety helped. But I just naturally went down the route of talking about how, this pesky little LCH, and, it's all these silly little cells and they're doing these crazy things, but don't you worry. And so I tried to go down that route. I think it was just it wasn't planned, it was just natural. And he was, and still is, a really bright chap. And he's also very sensitive. And I didn't want to give him anything that would unnaturally worry him when he didn't need to. He didn't need to know what we were going through. I believe that's for us to go through at that age, for him. And so that's what we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving towards the book now. So what made, I know you've said a little bit about it, but what made you think about putting this amazing little man's life down into this brilliant book?
Oh, thank you. I think it stemmed from that there wasn't that resource. So it stemmed from the fact that I felt we had to do something. And I just thought, a leaflet's a bit boring, really. When you're first diagnosed, or for us anyway, when you're stuck there in a small room with you and the child going through quite a lot of stress, and I was missing my baby, I was meant to be breastfeeding my new baby and all that kind of stuff as well. You need something to go through. We had a lot of Thomas the Tank Engine books, but something that would help him and to kind of bring that about. So it seems a natural lack of something that need to be filled. Nothing more than that, really. And also, I was constantly telling him the story, just verbally. And so I thought, well, actually, if there are children, and I'm part of the Facebook groups that a lot of parents are part of with LCH, and I thought, actually, if some people struggle with putting it into age appropriate terms, then maybe it helps somebody else. But really, it was kind of, and it was also, I think it was quite cathartic for me, if I'm really honest as well, just to kind of get it all down in a book and almost say goodbye to that chapter, because it was a fairly scary chapter in our lives. So I think that's why, really.
So in the book, there's obviously the sidekick, Mr. Wiggly.
Yeah.
Come up with the idea of Mr. Wiggly.
So Mr. Wiggly is really interesting. It's the doctors and nurses. So on PB ward, anyway, on PM Brown ward in Southampton, they just talk about Mr. Wiggly's. We thought it was quite amusing. So they literally, right, obviously at the beginning, they said, he's going to need to have this fitted. We call it Mr. Wiggly with the kids, and everybody just talks about their Mr. Wigglies. So when, for instance, we used to go to PB discos and stuff when he was feeling a little bit better, and they used to have little parties and things like that, like a lot of the pediatric oncology wards have, they'd all be running around talking about the Mr. Wigglies and all hanging out, and it's really cute. And I think humanizing what isn't a very nice thing, really, humanizing it, just kind of, it was better for us as well. It makes it easier. And like I think it was a couple of times a week, the nurse would come here at home to, sort it out and flush it and everything. And it just made it more fun to talk about, she's come to look after Mr. Wiggly, and, and Sebi actually became quite attached to Mr. Wiggly, to the point that when it was finally taken out, because it was getting a bit old and we have a few problems, they couldn't give him that one, but they gave him Mr. Wiggly, said it was his one, put it in a little box, named the box Mr. Wiggly, and he's still got it on his shelf as his like special Mr. Wiggly box. So why not? It's better, I think, as much if you can lighten stuff for kids. Like I said, like, they don't need to have this baggage. They're kids. They're only going to be that age once in their lives, so make it as enjoyable as possible. So that's what we tried to do.
So how long did it take you to actually put all the context together and sort of get all your ideas down on paper?
Quite a long time, because I did it, obviously I was a mum with a younger kid as well, and you have a lot of hospital appointments and stuff when you're going through this, and I was working as well part-time. I dropped my hours when all this happened, so probably over a couple of years, because it was a sort of like little dip-in project as I went. So the first thing I did was just, I remember writing it on paper, just piece of A4 paper, and I used to check it against Sebi because he quite liked the idea. I said, "Oh, we'll make a book for you," which he liked. And so I'd like read it out to him, and be like, no, 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 because by now he was probably about 5. So I finally published it when he was 6, but he was about 5. So I'd read it to him, and I just, because you read lots of books to your kids when they're young, you get that instant, either they like it or they don't. And he'd tell me bits and bobs. And then he said, "Oh, I really want you to make a big thing about Desmo and Mr. Wiggly. And I want Ellie, his cuddly toy that's been through everything with them. I want Ellie to be everywhere." And then he came up with the idea of an Ellie on every page. So yeah, Ellie was really important to him. Having one toy that went to every single procedure that he went to, every flush, every chemo he had, every MRI he had, Ellie was always there. That was really important for him as well. I'd recommend that because that just gave that constancy to every procedure and everything.
So with the illustrations, did you do them as you went, or did you wait till the end?
So I did those at the end, but I suppose I had a mind to them as I was writing. I'd sort of think, oh, because I've never done anything like this before. So I thought, oh, that could work quite well, you know. And then funnily enough, I actually had COVID right at the beginning. So when I think the COVID generally started in about the February of whatever year it was, February, March. And I had COVID in the April, and I had it really badly. So it was before people could be tested. It was like the week before people could be tested or something. So I was stuck in my bedroom, or our bedroom, and I was just, you know, in solitary sort of thing. So my husband brought my sketchbook up because I like sketching, and that's when I did a lot of the illustrations, because I was stuck in my bedroom. Well, I was ill for 6 weeks, but I was stuck in my bedroom for 2 or 3 weeks. So I just sat there drawing. So actually, COVID did us all proud, because it meant I could illustrate the book. So yeah, so I drew them in sketch form first, and then I'd once I was better, I sort of checked them against Sebi, and he'd say, "Oh, this needs to be a bit different," or whatever. He was very discerning because he's a bit of an artist himself. And then I transferred them to, you know, to proper white pages. I looked up and did a bit of research on what works with books and that kind of stuff, what kind of pencils, all that kind of thing. But it was all, I just made it up as I went along, really.
Did you have any challenges arise whilst you were writing it? And if you did, how did you get over them?
Yeah, I think making sure that the tone was right, and making sure that our story was representative enough to resonate with other people, because every LCH case seems to be so different, you know, like whether it's multi or single system, or just so different. So I cut out some of the details because I knew they wouldn't be relevant to other children. The diabetes insipidus, I was like, do I include that or not? Because some kids have the pituitary problem, some people don't. But I decided in the end that because so many do have that, I think, and it becomes such a core part of their LCH, I decided to include it. And then certain things like, you know, washing their hands and the germs, I thought actually that's kind of across the board. That's really important for all of them to know. Things like the Mr. Wiggly, most kids have the Mr. Wiggly or something very similar with the port or something. So yeah, I think making sure it resonated with everybody was really important. Making sure that it was something that Sebi would enjoy and a positive experience, and therefore other children would as well. And then mainly just publishing it, because again, I've never done anything like that before. That was interesting.
So how hard was it to actually get your book published?
So in the end, so I looked into I Googled, how do you publish your own book? And there are publishers and everything else, but it was so expensive. And I did this as like an extra thing. We didn't have the money. And then the more I looked into it, I started looking into self-publishing. And then I realized that on Amazon, you can self-publish a book. And it was a bit tortuous to do because I had to teach myself. So my days off work, my part-time days, I was looking into and teaching myself how to publish your own book. And I had to change some of the illustrations because they wouldn't work, and the format because it wouldn't work with Amazon publishing and that sort of stuff. But I did it that way. So I published it all myself on Amazon. I just decided to do it as an ebook first of all, but then I wanted to do a paperback one for Sebi. Then Jem, his little brother, wanted one. Then some of the family and friends said they would want one. So I was like, oh, okay. So I then set it up on Amazon that you could basically do it bespoke. So people, once they press the button, it gets printed just for that one. So it's not like a big batch that you have to pay for. And I think it's worked quite well. And then as soon as I put it out, I then decided, because of my PR side, I decided to make sure I put it into all the Facebook groups for children that would want it, and kept the price really as low as we could, and that all proceeds would go to Histio, over and above how much it cost to publish it. And then I got people saying, oh, we'd really like that in Dutch or in German or in French and all that sort of thing. So then I said, well, I don't have a clue. But then people say, oh no, I can translate this, I can translate that. So then we had a couple of other different translations. Then I gave some copies to PB Ward, and then they said, oh, you should really, and the Great Ormond Street Dr. Nanduri that he sees, and they said, oh, really, you should share this with other oncology wards around the country. So then I think I printed 2 or 3 copies that I paid for on Amazon, and then I sent those to all of the paediatric oncology wards around the country. But that's all I could afford, really, just for the cover letter. I didn't want it to sound salesy, because it wasn't. It's not to make money at all. It's to fulfill that need that we wanted at the beginning to have stuff. And I basically just said, look, I've tried to keep the cost down. All the proceeds go to Histio. If these books, if you could make sure they go to kids with LCH, newly diagnosed, then it's there if you want any more, sort of thing. So I didn't get any feedback, but I'm hoping it helped. Yeah.
I'm sure it will. I'm really sure it will. So I know you've done the short video for us here at Histio UK, living in a chemo house. Looking back now, do you think there's any tips or any advice that you could give other parents or patients that are dealing with LCH?
Generally, or around the chemo house? Just
generally. Just generally.
Well, I think ironically, we ended up being very well prepared for COVID, didn't we? Because when we were running the chemo house, and with children, obviously you have to be a bit more careful than with adults. So all our friends used to come round, and we had the hand gel, and we had the blue paper for people visiting, all that kind of stuff, and it was all a bit weird. And then COVID hit. In fact, ironically, it was within a year of Sebi stopping chemo. He did his chemo, then he had a year where they said he's still a bit immunosuppressed, so be a bit careful. And then we just crossed that anniversary in the January. We're like, yes. So we threw out, all the blue rolls. So, right, that's enough to hand gels. 3 months later, what was the government saying? COVID, everybody gel your hands, wash your hands. And we're like, oh, no, not again. But we kind of knew it because we were experts in it. So I guess one of my tips would be, it's a bit like being COVID safe, like it's protecting the kid without being over the top about it. But we've still kept habits, like whenever we've all been out of the house, we always wash our hands when we come into the house. And we did that through COVID as well. And it's actually, I think it's quite a good tip when you've got an immunosuppressed kid. We didn't live and breathe LCH at all. Like it didn't take over our lives. Obviously up here, Rick and I were always worrying, but so we took up every trip that the hospital ran for kids, whether it was going to see Thomas the Tank Engine or going to the zoo, or we tried to fill every weekend with something fun to look forward to sort of count away all the procedures. And it was something for us as well to look forward to. And also, obviously, we had a younger sibling, and it's important for the sibling to be part of everything as well. And otherwise, all the mummy time is taken up by the kid going and having their chemo and their procedures at hospital, and the other kid ends up, with the childminder or members of the family and everything. So yeah, take up all the trips that you can. Talk to your POON, your paediatric outreach nurse. They were really lovely. Things like I put in the back of the book, but things like taking up help from charities, like things like Home Start really helped us, because it meant, and Rainbow Trust, because I had a young child, it's full on that I didn't have any time to myself. And so things like having Rainbow Trust to come and just look after Jeremy and give Jeremy some fun time whilst I had to go and MRIs or whatever we were doing with Sebi, that was really good. And also Dawn, our Rainbow Trust lady, was brilliant just emotionally for me. She just gave me a hug and had to be subtle because the kids were around, but I knew she had my back. Home Start was brilliant, just for an hour. They just come and they'll just like look after the kids while I just went up for a sleep, because any adult and any parent of young children will know you still have all those things like the kids napping, being full on, you needing a bit of a nap, all that sort of thing. So take up all the help you can. And also I used emails. I mean, now you could use a WhatsApp group, but back then it was emails. It's like 8 years ago now when he was diagnosed, 7 or 8 years ago, because I found, although it was coming from the loveliest places, I had so many friends and family checking in with me every day saying, how is he? And particularly when we're going through bad times, to have to say again and again what was going on, it sounds really selfish, but it's really hard. It's really hard to do that. So just putting it into an email every few days, just saying, here's just an update, you know, forgive me if I don't get back to you personally, but this is what's going on, really helped. And I think it helped me, but I know friends and family said it helped them as well to feel they were part of it. Yeah, I think they're my main tips.
No, very good. So just finally, just tell us a little bit more about Sebi. I know a long time now has passed since his diagnosis. So just a little bit more about him, how his treatment's going, and how he's really doing now, to be honest.
Yeah, so he's thriving now. He's really happy chappy. So we came off chemo. We came off the Mr. Wiggly chemo, and then we had a couple of years because it came back. The LCH came back, but they decided, sort of risk benefit, not to put the Mr. Wiggly back in. So we went on the methotrexate and I can't remember the other one. Another one started with them, but they were tablets. So that made life a lot easier because I put in the book it meant he could go swimming and things like that. And then we had a year of immunosuppression, sort of, you know, rushing out, and then since then, to be honest, brilliant, really good. I mean, we still go to see our doctor, our oncologist, every 6 months. He still goes to an endocrinologist every 6 months. We still go to the neurologist once a year. We go and see ENT every 6 months. We see the ophthalmologist every 6 months. There's a lot of ologists we still have to see. We went for bloods this morning, in fact, for the endocrinologist. That's another one for the diabetes insipidus. But Seb's so good at it now. Like this morning, his blood test, he really winced when he had it, but he never complains. He's such a strong character and so brave. And I said to him afterwards, are you all right? He goes, oh, Mum, yeah, that was a bad one, that, but it's okay. And he said, and I said, you know what, do you realise how brave you are? I said, a lot of adults would be crying and moaning and wailing. And I said, you never make a peek, you know. And they offered him a sticker. He went, no, it's all right. I thought, oh, that's so sweet. So he's a really kind chap. I think going through what he's been through has made him incredibly empathetic. He's a very caring chap. Very into arts and crafts, which again, partly genetic, I think, but also we spent hours and hours on hospital wards where when you're stuck in bed, you know, the play specialists, who are incredible, like play specialists are amazing in the children's wards. They just got to know Seb and they would just bring all sorts of things. We had like rubber gloves that we blow up into balloons and hang from the ceiling, and the wee pots, we used to call them, that we make into hats and run around the room, all sorts of things like that. And that's made him quite crafty and arty, I think. So he's doing really, really well. He's thriving at school. And yeah, if you'd have told me nearly 8 years ago when he was diagnosed that he'd be here at age 10, and being so happy and kind and everything else, yeah, that's all I would want to have heard, actually. But you don't know back then, do you? So
no. Well, from all of us here at Histio, we thank you for your time today. Honestly, it's
you're very welcome.
The book's brilliant. We all wish you and the family all the best for the future. And,
thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, and thanks to Histio, because you're amazing. I should mention Lynn as well. Like, they've been absolutely incredible as well. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.